Hey there, Twins fans. My name is Seth Stone, and you're listening to the not quite post-game pint, but it's late inning pint, or as John called it, the night, what is it, late night nightcap or something like that.
Ninth inning nightcap. But it's not even
Ninth inning nightcap, yeah.
I know, but we're already a little after 10 o'clock, so it was time to get the show going here a little bit. My name is Seth Stone of Twins Daily. Welcome to tonight's podcast show thingy. Whether you're watching on Facebook Live, Twitter, and Periscope Live, or on YouTube Live, or if you're watching this later, welcome. For all of you that are here already, we're getting a few trickling in. Whether you're on any of those platforms, we'll take your questions throughout the night. So send them to us. We got plenty of topics to kind of cover as the game gets going and continues here. We can't necessarily do any sort of play-by-play or live discussion of the game itself, but we can talk about things that have happened throughout the night. So with that, I'll introduce our guests. Let's start with David Youngs. And I don't know if you're drinking a post-game pint yet, but what do you got?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Seth. It's great to be here tonight. Obviously, Twins are looking a little better than they did last night. I am indeed drinking a post-game or almost post-game pint, a Fulton hard seltzer, lemon lime, brewed in beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota, gluten-free. You'll notice my can koozie from the state Class B amateur baseball tournament, which I attended to support my favorite Moorhead Mudcats town baseball team. A lot of Concordia Cobbers on that team, so I figured I had to rock it tonight. Roll Cobbs.
Roll Cubs.
Roll Cobbs, that's right. But it's great to be here tonight, and it's great to see that the Twins have put some runs up on the board so far.
David, I want to continue with you for just a second. You posted an article early today on the Twins' brief history at Wrigley Field, and I know you've got another article set to publish, I believe, tomorrow morning, Sunday morning. Give us just a 30-second elevator through of what you've been working on the last couple of days here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this morning I had a brief article published on the Twins' brief history at Wrigley Field. Despite the close geography, the Twins have only played at Wrigley Field 15 times, well, 16 times now after Game 1 last night. So they're two teams that haven't played each other much. Interleague play didn't start till 1997. So I dove into the brief history of how the two teams have done against each other at Wrigley Field. And I had a fun time writing that, especially because Wrigley Field is obviously a luxury in the game of baseball. It was on my bucket list as a kid growing up, as it is for a lot of baseball fans. And then tomorrow I've got a really fun article coming out about a former ball boy for the Minnesota Twins in the late 70s and early 80s. And I had a chance to chat with him, learn some really fun stories that he had to share with me. And really, like a lot of us here, he's been a Minnesota Twins fan his whole life, still watches the Twins every single night. And was able to reminisce on that experience of he got to be on the field for 2-3 years during high school as a ball and bat boy for the Minnesota Twins, and that one's going to come out tomorrow morning, so I would encourage you to check it out. He's got some funny stories, including a Billy Martin story. Obviously Billy Martin was quite the character, so I would encourage you to check it out along with all the other great articles on Twins Daily.
All right, and our other guest tonight here, not the other guest, we're all equal here. I'm not putting him second here, last but not least, but Matthew Trueblood, you've been busy this week. First, I think it's great to have you on here because I know you're a diehard Cubs and Twins guy. You're writing Twins stuff for Twins Daily. One, what are you enjoying to drink this evening? And secondly, I know you've had a couple articles this week, one on playing Travis Blankenhorn every day, which not sure that's possible at this point. Right. And then on Randy Dobnak just the other day and what kind of role he can play in the playoffs. So, your evening.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Good to be with you guys. I am drinking a Balls, BAWLS, Guarana root beer, which is bottled and brewed in Twinsburg, Ohio. So, a little Twins connection. It's good, so I recommend it. Yeah, I mean, I wrote about Blankenhorn. Obviously, that was in the small window where it looked like there was any hope of him pushing his way into meaningful playing time for this team. I still think it would have been a good idea, or at least they should have gotten a longer look. 7 runs tonight, notwithstanding, and especially, we'll talk more about how those 7 runs came to be. This offense is not fully functional. I don't know that we can expect it to become fully functional in the next week to 10 days. And it would have been nice to look at another option who might, occasionally push an A-Ray Adrianza or Marwin Gonzalez off the field when otherwise they need to be in the lineup. But obviously they went another direction with that. My other article was about Randy Dobnak, as you mentioned, and how, optioning him obviously doesn't preclude him being a part of the playoff pitching staff, and he's going to be a part of that staff. I think at this point, with some of the question marks around Jake Odorizzi, he may need to start at some point in the postseason if they make a deep run. But my point was, especially early, especially during the wild card series, you've got to get him prepared for a meaningful role in relief. As deep as this Twins bullpen is, Dobnak does some things that other pitchers in this bullpen do not do. He gets ground balls at an extremely high rate. I wrote about the characteristics of his sinker that make that possible. I wrote about the fact that he gives a very different look, just stylistically, the pitch mix and the delivery from most of the other Twins hurlers, especially the starting staff. And in that way, he kind of adds another wrinkle to your bullpen. Plus, obviously, the durability to go multiple innings. A lot of people maybe are forgetting the automatic runner rule is gone once the playoffs start. So whereas we've gone all this season without really any chance of a game going 15, 16 innings, that could happen with your whole season on the line. And Randy Dobnak could be a big difference maker in a situation like that. So a few things to kick around in terms of how he fits, because I do think this is still a really important pitcher to the Twins' hopes in the playoffs, even though it's obviously a smaller role than maybe we envisioned for him a week or two ago.
No question. All right. And again, my name is Seth Stone of Twins Daily. And this week, my lone article, I believe, was on Travis Blankenhorn as well. Him getting the call, hearing the thoughts of the manager, the bench coach, talking to his minor league infield coach, and then talking to both Baldelli and Blankenhorn after he got into the game and hit a double. So, as you can see, I'm looking at Twins Daily here right now. And, of course, the new article here tonight, written by Cody Christie, is on Ron Gardenhire retiring. And obviously he's retiring as the manager of the Tigers as of today. And health concerns and health was raised as the big issue. I believe his contract was up at the end of the year with the Tigers now, but I think most people would fully understand, hopefully Twins fans fully understand that he brought nearly 30 seasons to the Minnesota Twins. And I think, hopefully we can celebrate him a little bit here tonight. I do want to real quickly mention if anyone else wants to share in the chat room what you're drinking. I know Alan is drinking a Clamato. It's up to you. Bloody Mary there. So we've got that. But real quickly, I'll start with you this time, Matthew. Your thoughts on Ron Gardenhire, the decision today, and how much of this do you believe is health related?
Yeah, I mean, to start with the last question, I don't know. And I don't think any of us have a real clear idea yet. There've been a couple of statements from the Tigers and from Gardenhire, and it's mostly been about gratitude for these last couple of seasons and to the fans and optimism for the future of that franchise. I think my read on that situation is that with his contract being up and them being almost ready to sort of turn a corner in their rebuild, and just the way the last couple of seasons have unfolded for them, that I don't know that he wouldn't have been welcome back, but it would have been something that have had to talk about more, and maybe, the Tigers were at least kicking around moving on anyway. And Gardy may have said, well, I'd rather step away under those circumstances than have my fate sort of worked out in public. That's the way it feels to me. We could be wrong about that. We'll just have to see. Again, hopefully Gardy is going to stay healthy. It's obviously great that he battled back from cancer once already and has been healthy over the last few years, but it's a tricky time. So yeah, cheers to him on a great career. And obviously he leaves a crucial legacy in Minnesota. It stretched on for a long time, sort of after things soured, but that wasn't necessarily Gardenhire's fault. And there are a lot of things that he did well as a manager that helped them surge forward in the early to mid 2000s in a way that they probably wouldn't have under any other manager.
For sure. And real quickly, again, if you want to tell us what you're drinking, what your post-game or ninth inning nightcap, just maybe Arena chimes in. Water in a Trevor Plouffe cup. And I hope that's like a drinking cup and not a anyway. David, your thoughts on Ron Gardenhire, the news today, and kind of what you see?
Well, first of all, Arena, I have 3 of those exact Trevor Plouffe cups, so I resonate with you on that. But yeah, with Ron Gardenhire today, as I was telling Seth earlier, I found out today via a friend, and I was like, wow, is this true? And it really hit me because I'm 22 years old. I'm too young to remember the Tom Kelly era with the Minnesota Twins. And for me, Ron Gardenhire was all I knew when it came to managing the Minnesota Twins, minus watching Little Big League when the 12-year-old managed the team. But for me, I mean, you heard throughout the broadcast tonight Justin Morneau talking about Ron Gardenhire, about how he was, a father-like figure for him, a 22-year-old individual. Justin said, other guys my age were in college, and I was, doing college-like things, and Ron was like a father to me, and Gardy helped me, get things together. You've heard the stories from Dick Bramer's son, Eric Bramer, as well as Justin tonight on the broadcast, talking about how on Sundays before games started, Gardy would get there early and throw batting practice to the children of all the players on the team and the broadcasters on the team, whether they were 2 and whether they were 10. And I think that says a lot about his character. And when you look back at his run with the Twins and the Tigers, yeah, I think his overall win-loss record it's below 500. But at the end of the day, he was so crucial for the Twins organizations. 6 AL Central titles. Obviously, 1 Manager of the Year for the AL in 2010. Second most wins all time after Tom Kelly. And at the end of the day, obviously, we hope nothing but the best for Gardy's health and for him, his family, and his well-being. As Justin Morneau said on the broadcast, hopefully he's able to go sail off on a pontoon on one of Minnesota's 10,000 lakes. But for me personally, I just can't be more thankful for the impact that Gardy had, not only on the Twins, but on me as a baseball fan.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, again, I am old enough to remember the Tom Kelly years and those World Series championships and all that. And I remember the lean years of the 1990s, late 90s, where they really struggled. And Tom Kelly brought them to that point in 2001 where they kind of competed for the first half of that season. But then Tom Kelly was ready to retire and hand it over to Ron Gardenhire. And I know Paul Molitor was a candidate at that time as well. But it was clear that Kelly's choice and Terry Ryan's ultimately was Ron Gardenhire, and I think we understand why. Different than Molitor, different than Baldelli, in that he is very fiery, and that was a lot of fun back in the days when there wasn't replay and managers could go out and do whatever they wanted, say whatever they wanted. So he was a lot of fun. He was definitely a player's manager. A little old school. I've talked to some players, who said that he, along with his coaching staff, which has been Joe Vavra and Rick Anderson and Steve Little and Scott Olger and all these names, those guys could coach with anyone, and they put in the time for anyone, even the backups. If they wanted extra BP, he would stay around. The coaches would stay around. And then just more on a personal level, I really feel like my first, I guess, forays into the clubhouse, he was the manager. So down in spring training, it wasn't often, but he was always just really good. And really, he was very good at being funny, giving a good answer, giving a strong answer, giving a funny answer. And then ultimately you think, what did he just say? But anyway, I just think, well over 1,000 wins in a Twins uniform, did a lot of good things during those years, won the manager of the year. Unfortunately went out when things were poor, but I hope that most Twins fans remember the good. And I think he did a great job with that staff of winning a ton of games. So with that, we're nearly done here in the bottom of the ninth. So, want to definitely welcome any questions, comments for those out there. Wanted to talk a little bit, and we talked about Gardenhire. I wanted to talk just briefly about the comments before the game. Josh Donaldson finally spoke a little bit about his ejection the other day. Morneau actually asked him, according to reports in the press conference before the game, about getting ejected and if he felt it was a good thing or whatever. And Donaldson didn't back down. He went right back at the other former MVP and Morneau and basically said, hey, I hear you're getting texts of how embarrassing this was, and this is my livelihood, which I thought was a weird answer. We're going to start with Matthew on this one as well. What are your thoughts on Donaldson's response? I thought that was an interesting response. We don't always want the canned, boring response because it's boring, but now it's almost a little questionable with what he said, but he was honest. So how do we take that?
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't certainly be shocked that Josh Donaldson is self-assured and not cowed by other people's opinions. That's been Josh Donaldson for as long as he's been in the major leagues and then some, as long as he's been in professional baseball and then some. I will say I think he's wrong, and one of the downsides to being very self-assured and a bit stubborn, there are a lot of upsides that have gotten him this far in his career and made him the great player he is. One of the downsides is when you're wrong, you just can't admit it. It was petulant. It was kind of weak. I think a lot of people thought it was funny. To me, funny is like if he'd actually done something funny. He just sort of seemed childish. He was angry. He'd already won. He hit the home run. Just get back in the dugout and go win this game. Sometimes having, being a bit of a red, can we swear on here? I don't know. Being that kind of guy who's going to go and fight tooth and nail for everything. Sometimes you get a little more into that mode than you need to be in a moment, especially in a long season, especially in a game that doesn't require you to be burning at full flame all the time. I think he should have kept his temper. He could have given a quip to the ump as he passed him at the plate and not gotten kicked out of the game and still got the satisfaction of saying you were wrong. But instead he chose to drag his foot across the base and show him up. And it cost the team. I mean, it didn't necessarily cost him the game. Other things happened that could have happened a different way. But I don't know. I mean, he doesn't have to be embarrassed about it. Embarrassed is the wrong word. And that's old school players being a little too old school too. But to me, it's move on and focus on baseball. And he failed to do that and doesn't want to admit that that was a mistake because that's who he is. And you take the good with the bad when it comes to stuff like that. Because, again, that's what makes Josh Donaldson a great baseball player. But it doesn't make him right in this situation.
David, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective when you heard that story?
Yeah. Well, I would like to reference first and foremost Pete Carroll, coach of the Seattle Seahawks, has been a big advocate of letting his players be themselves. And I think Rocco Baldelli does a good job of that too. And I'm not here to say that Josh Donaldson shouldn't be himself. Heck, I'm a 22-year-old kid sitting in my one-bedroom apartment in St. Peter, Minnesota. Josh Donaldson is a former MVP, talented baseball player. And we all know that Josh Donaldson is he's a fiery player, similar to John McEnroe in tennis, perhaps. He plays his best when he's fired up, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, referencing Nelson Cruz and his interview with Marnie Gellner a few days ago after Cruz and Baldelli were ejected, Cruz said, we have to focus on what we can control. Josh Donaldson can't control the calls behind the plate. He can get upset at them, absolutely. And does he want to do that? Can he? Absolutely. That's fine. If he wants to question the ump, that's his decision. And that's something that we see players all the time have constructive conversations with umpires, asking, is that out? Was that in? Did I check? Things like that. But what Donaldson did was obviously over the top. I'm not gonna lie. In the moment, it fired me up. I was like, heck yeah, this is fun to watch. But after I thought about it a little more, I thought, well, the Twins are playing the team that they are down to in the division. And it's a crucial game when it comes to winning the division and then also getting home field advantage. And at the same time, he's a key bat in the lineup. And as we saw later in the game, we don't know if he makes that play or not. That Ari Adrianza did not make it third play, but he didn't make it because he had been ejected from the game. And at the end of the day, I think when you look at Donaldson's comments today with Morneau and just calling out MLB umpires about not being held accountable, obviously, I do not know what it's like to be a Major League Baseball player who has been screwed out of a bad call. But I think that at some point, you got to focus on what Nelson Cruz said. Focus on what you can control. You got to let it go. Absolutely, MLB umpires should be held to the highest standard. Just like Major League Baseball players, they're the best at what they do. That's why they're in the major leagues. But at the end of the day, they're trying their best to make the right calls. And yeah, they're going to miss some. And yes, players are going to be upset, and that's okay. But you got to move on, and you got to focus on helping with your team, finish as high as you can and get that home field advantage or whatever it may be.
Speaking of moving on, we have a final. Minnesota win tonight against the Cubs. I believe 8-1 was the final score. As you can see here, I mean, it was a big inning that did it. Basically, Eddie Rosario got the scoring going on in the early innings, first inning with a home run to end the no-hit bid for Alec Mills tonight in the first inning. 2 batters into the game, so we like that. Chicago tied up the score, and then it took until the 6th when the Twins had a big inning again. Eddie Rosario with the big hit, starting that with a single. A little while later, Miguel Montero hit about a 9,000-foot home run. That was the big blow. And then again, just kind of things kept escalating, and they kept adding on. And the Twins needed that. I think we can all agree with that. But, they needed a game where they were able to get some extra runs and to hang on and to let the bullpen work real quickly. Michael Pineda was the starting pitcher tonight. He went 5 innings, and he was up to 92 pitches, so you can understand why he came out when he did. Just 1 run. And so another nice job by Pineda. Tyler Duffy had an 8-pitch inning in which he absolutely dominated the 6th. Matt Whistler struck out 6 batters in 2 innings. Matt Whistler is pretty good. And then Tyler Clippard finished up in the 9th. Matt, what was your key story of the game, in your opinion, tonight?
I think it's probably Rosario, just that he, there's obviously been a lot of volatility with Eddie Rosario. There is in any season, even a short season like this. And there have been folks even at our site who I think with good reason have started to wonder whether it's time for the Twins to move past him. But every time you get almost to that point, he'll have a game like this. In fact, he'll have a week like this where he's not turning games, he's not doing absolutely everything you can do right throughout a game to win it. He doesn't dominate games the way the best players in the sport do, but he finds ways to make you better at times when you sort of least expect it and most need it. And teeing off on a first pitch, which is exactly when you should go get a guy like Alec Mills, especially with 2 outs and the bases empty, to give the Twins the early lead. the RBI single to break the tie in the middle innings, I mean, that's huge right there. That really swings the game, because especially you have where the Cubs are with their pitching staff and where the Twins are with their pitching staff at the moment. That opened up, I think, even more than it felt like at the time, maybe even more than Twins fans can fully grasp if they don't follow what's happening with the Cubs. That it being behind at that moment in the game put a lot of pressure into that home dugout. Not that the Cubs have been playing really well, and this loss doesn't cripple them, but that was a huge go-ahead hit. And Rosario keeps coming up with those big hits in the big situations. He makes such obvious mistakes and has such obvious flaws that it can be really hard to fully embrace him. But I know you say it all the time, Seth. We love watching Eddie Rosario play baseball. Tonight was another good reminder of why.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but was it Bobby Abreu who was very, very underrated for so long that eventually he almost became overrated? I know there was a player maybe about 10, 15 years ago where it was like he was so underrated, and everyone talked about how underrated he was to the point where everyone kind of overrated him. And I think it's kind of the same with Rosario. You know, it's everyone hates the little flaws. Everyone hates the base running. He had a play tonight where he slipped on the base and he got out. I mean, you know, that's not like a character flaw. It's just he, you know, went in wrong and slipped and got tagged out. So, but I really feel like everyone just wants to find everything wrong with him. And then ultimately you look at his numbers at the end of most years. I'm not willing to worry too much about the overall stats in a 60-game season relative to a 162-game season. So typically he's somewhere in that 280 range with around 30 home runs, 30 doubles, and 100 RBIs. And, you know, I know it doesn't necessarily match the current way players are evaluated, and that's fine, but that's still a really good player. So I almost feel like he's so over that we forget that he's still really a good ball player. David, what was your key story of the game tonight?
Yeah, well, I think that Rosario was certainly the big spark, but I also, we wouldn't be giving the Twins bullpen justice without talking about them. The Twins bullpen gave up one hit tonight. And hello to my good friend Ben Swanson. Heck yeah, the Twins got a playoff berth tonight. That's good to see. But the Twins bullpen gave up one hit. Matt Whistler struck out 6 guys. On the night, Pineda gave up 4 hits in 5 innings. In my opinion, Pineda, this wasn't his best outing of the year, but at the same time, not a bad outing at all. And, we've seen a fair amount of consistency from the Twins bullpen. Yes, 3 or 4 games ago against the White Sox, there was a blunder where they did not perform as well. But this Twins pitching staff as a whole has been really solid. I think when you look at the Twins and Cubs compared to each other, they're similar in the sense that they're seeing some solid pitching. Kyle Hendricks is a very good pitcher for the Cubs. Hills for the Cubs, obviously, is coming off a no-hitter and didn't pitch horrible tonight by any means. They've got John Lester. And I think, the Twins have one of the strongest top 3 or 4 rotations, in my opinion, in the league when Rich Hill is pitching his best or if Odorizzi is healthy. Now, if they can perform to that level, that's what really matters. And now it's just a matter if we can get the offense going. But my story for tonight would be the bullpen. Only a 5-inning outing from Pineda, and then just 1 hit given up by the bullpen.
Yeah, the bullpen was definitely strong again. Like I said, I mean, I turned away from the game for just a second, and Duffy got 3 outs really, really quickly. So
6 pitches, I think.
Yeah, it was 8 pitches, I think.
Or 8 pitches, sorry, 2 off.
Yeah, so what I want to do now is we've got a few questions in the chat room, and I definitely want to, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, or YouTube, you can send in your questions, and we'll get to those, and I want to encourage those. About a Twins win, and for the second straight year, they are playoff bound officially after their win tonight. So that is very encouraging. Want to jump back to a question we got from Rena. All right, we're going to start with David on this one. Should be a quick answer. David, quick answer. Quick answer? All right, David, you're in the bottom of the ninth, base loaded, 2 outs. Assuming Cruz and Buxton are both on base, who do you currently trust the most at the plate? We're going to follow that with Matthew. So, David, go ahead.
Well, if we're going with tonight's results, I would have to go with Rosario.
All right. Matt, do you agree, or is there another answer you'd come up with?
Yeah, I think I've got to go with Rosario too. The other answer I flash on is Miguel Sano. We saw what he did to a little bit of a mistake, but it still wasn't a terrible pitch in that 7th inning. And he, you can trust him to hit the ball hard. And with the bases loaded, especially, I think the pressure's on the pitcher to throw a strike, which I like because then you can't catch Sano expanding. Obviously, Eddie Rosario will expand his zone too, but he'll, he kind of does that in a different way. I might think about Sano, but Rosario's, again, I go back to, I love watching him play in those big situations, rise to those big moments. I think if you've got to get the run home, I want Eddie Rosario to go up there, and it may be a poke single on a slider where he was fooled, or he may drive it into the gap. But yeah, if it's not Cruz or Buxton, I'm probably going with Eddie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of who else. And Sano, maybe if you're down by 3 and you need that home run. But again, I would take Rosario over Sano probably, just because he's going to put the ball in play and give you some chance. The only other name I think of is maybe Polanco. Even though he's had a down year and he hasn't had the power, I still feel like most of his at-bats are generally pretty good. So I would say that.
I love this. I did it in my head with Josh Donaldson also on base. My answer is Donaldson. I think he's the guy who it doesn't have as many holes in his swing as Sano, and will work that pitcher and force the ball into the zone more than Rosario. I think there are still a few good options, as we just sort of demonstrated. But yeah, my answer probably would be Josh Donaldson.
Yeah. As I'm looking at the lineup here on the side, his name is way down at like the 9th name mentioned. I suddenly realized that as I was just about done. That's a pretty good option too. So I won't dwell on my answer too much there. We're going to keep looking for your questions. Feel free to get them in here. Let's go with Mike Link's question next. Again, keep them coming. If you move on from Rosario, you better be sure about Larnach and Kirilloff, because Kepler does not look like someone I want to count on. So that's not really a question, but a comment, and we're going to start with Matt on this one first. One, how concerned are you about Kepler long-term, short-term, and how do we possibly gain any confidence in Larnach and Kirilloff without seeing them in big league games?
That's right. You really can't. And I want to caution people against losing or gaining too much confidence in anyone over the course of this particular season. We know that Kepler's dealt with some injuries even during this season, but mostly just with the strange ramp up, the way players have talked about being affected by the loss of the availability of video within games, the issues with pitch recognition that sort of the whole league was having early in the season. I don't think Max Kepler is the super stud we saw in the first half of last year before he started dealing with injuries. I also don't think he's the extremely diminished guy we saw down the stretch last year because of those injuries, or the guy who's been so inconsistent this season. If you go back to kind of the second half of 2018, and I know I'm stretching memories a bit here, but you go back to that guy who I think it's that 825 to 850 OPS, good, consistent at bats, not great against left-handed pitching, but not catastrophic either. Going to hang in there, not going to run a real high batting average just because of his batted ball profile, but will give you power, patience, and not too many strikeouts. And he's going to play a really solid defensive right field. I don't want anyone to get too down on Max Kepler because of this season, because I just don't think it provides us a real good environment for evaluation. And obviously that goes triple for any minor leaguer about whom we're only getting whispers from an alternate site environment that itself isn't a good environment for even teams to evaluate.
So I did have a source tell me recently that Alex Kirilloff is hitting over 500 with a bunch of homers and doubles in about 75 plate appearances so far in the alternate. But again, what does that mean? I'm big on right now the whole idea that whatever happens in the 60 games, I hope front offices aren't making player evaluations based off of 60 game samples. And obviously they have to some degree on free agents. They kind of have to guess, and a lot of factors go into that. And some of that is the numbers they're putting up this year. But I don't think it can be the full, because you just don't know. I mean, if a guy has been hurting, like you said. Now I'm looking again after tonight's game. Kepler's batting 205. He was 1 for 4, batting 205 with a 694 OPS, which is not good. I won't pretend it's good, but when you consider the batting average and the injuries, I mean, he's almost at a 700 OPS, which, again, I'm not claiming by any means that that's good, but there are a lot of guys in the low 600s and even 500s on this roster. So you take his defense in the right field or in center field as needed, and I still think you got a pretty good player. David, what would you add to Mike's comments regarding Rosario, Larnett, Kirilloff, and Kepler?
Yeah, well, I think that I would first and foremost emphasize that, 60 games is not a strong sample size, and especially when you've got injuries in there like Kepler has. Kepler, as we've seen in the past, is a very good outfielder. I would say personally, and not everybody would agree with me, and that's okay. After Buxton, when he's healthy, Kepler is much more consistent than Rosario when it comes to both in the field and at the plate. We've seen Kepler really break out at times. He's not going to strike out as much as Rosario is going to. And like we already talked about, he's rock solid in the field. So I think, yes, it is very frustrating when he has games like he has the last couple games coming off of the injury. And especially when you've got studs like Kirilloff down at the alternate site, I think it's really easy to say, well, heck yeah, let's bring this guy up. But I think at the end of the day, it's just important to remember that, Max Kepler has a lot of big league experience. Not only does he have big league experience, he has big league success. And at the end of the day, I think that's going to prove to be valuable for the Twins, hopefully this year in the postseason.
It's immensely valuable, and I do think I'm kind of known as the prospect guy, and I have people that tell me all the time that I'm too high on this prospect or too high on that prospect. I've also been doing it long enough to realize that top prospects don't always make it, and guys sometimes come out of nowhere. So that major league success that you just mentioned, David, is so important, and it's something every front office has to deal with. Every front office has a few top 50 or top 100 guys, and the big decision, as we've talked about in the offseason, is Rosario is going to make $9 million next year in his final year of arbitration. Those guys are going to make $500,000, and there's $8.5 million difference, which, again, in the old times may have just been saved. With this front office right now, that I believe that they would use that on something else or to pay for somebody, maybe a Barrios extension or whatever it happens to be. That has to factor in, and you have to take your risk on these minor league guys. I'm going to call for last call for questions if anyone's got those right now. The Twins have, I believe, 6 games to play after tonight. They have tomorrow night against the Cubs, a day off, 2 against Detroit, a day off, and then 3 against Cincinnati, who, by the way, is pretty good too, as we were talking about earlier. Any last questions, feel free to get those in. I do want to throw this one out there because I really hadn't thought of it. Jeffers was used briefly in the Avila situation. Garver came back in. What if Garver would have been hurt? Who is that emergency catcher? I wonder if it's like Adrianza, but I think he was on the game already being replaced by Donaldson. So thankfully we don't have to worry about that. Let's just leave that as a hypothetical.
Hey, I'm down in St. Peter. I was a catcher in high school. I got my pads. I'd be more than happy to make the hour trek up north.
Well, unfortunately, you'd have to go to Wrigley.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me, Southeast.
So, yeah, I don't know if Tomas Talise is on the practice squad right now, but I don't know. So I'm going to go with that. Hypothetically, Matt, who would you love to see be that emergency catcher? Just for fun.
Oh, Miguel Sano. I want to see how many things Miguel Sano can do. I want to see how many things Miguel Sano can't do. Yeah, Miguel Sano, I want him to pitch and catch. Have him play all 9 positions some game. Except right field, we've seen enough of that.
David, your thoughts? Which Twins player would you like to see catch in an emergency?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hate to be a copycat here, but it is fun to watch Miguel Sano do whatever he does in a baseball atmosphere, whether he's hitting, whether he's fielding, whether he's throwing the ball. And I feel like he's a big guy behind the plate. Could be a impromptu Yadier Molina if he had to. He's a big boy, and I'm not saying it would go well, but he's got a strong arm. And I would have to agree with Matthew on this one that Sano would be who I'd most like to see if we were down all of our catchers.
So, frankly, just to be different, I'm going to go with Jake Cave because I'd love to see a left-handed catcher someday.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I feel like, you don't want Kepler back there. I don't want Wade Jr. back there. And I just feel like Jake Cave, with how much he hustles on the field, he'd do it. I feel like he'd do it.
He's got that gray catcher beard going.
Oh, here we go. As John Landis mentions, Donaldson is a catcher.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if they'd want to throw their $100 million man back there, but, why not?
He's got that catcher mentality, quarterback of the field.
You immediately eliminate him because of the contract. But, yeah, he when he was an amateur, I think he went to Auburn. When he was in college, he got to campus as a third baseman and just said, I want to catch. And they let him catch a little. He got into pro ball with the Cubs starting in 2007. They wanted to move him back out to even shortstop and then to third. He said, no, I want to catch. So I think it wouldn't take a lot in an emergency situation to convince Josh Donaldson to go catch. But the Twins would never do it because, come on, you can't risk that.
Way too risky. All right, we got a question from my buddy Rennie here. Who do you trust the most in the 9th right now with a 1-run lead? David, let's start with you on that one.
Oh, man, well, that's a great question. Well, if you were to ask me last year, I would say Taylor Rogers. But it's 2020. It's not 2019. And, I would have to say, this may not be a popular opinion, but Tyler Duffy. Tyler Duffy's been rock solid lately. And maybe I'm giving that answer because of the strong performance he had today. Now, is he somebody that we're going to see in the 9th inning regularly? Probably not. Probably not by any means. But he's been fun to watch recently. And he's provided results.
I can't imagine another answer than your best bullpen arm, and that's been Duffy most of the year. So, Matt, you got a different answer right now for that?
Well, Duffy's clearly your relief ace. He's the best reliever on this staff at this point. I will say in most scenarios, especially in the playoffs, you get to that 9th inning with a 1-run lead, it's probably because Tyler Duffy already pitched, just the way Rocco uses him. So the other guy I would throw out is Matt Whistler, and I know he hasn't been challenged a lot with that kind of situation to this point, but it's easy to trust because everything he is doing it's hard on everybody. There were a couple of guys that he faced during those 2 innings tonight who are, in theory, pretty bad matchups for him. Javi Baez is a guy, when he knows that a slider's coming a lot, he'll sit on it and he will just obliterate it. And he still got a couple of bad swings out of him and got him out pretty easily and got everybody that he was assigned out pretty easily. The only hit was a blooper, a real cheapie. So Whistler, it seems strange given where he was in the bullpen pecking order when the year started. And obviously you're kind of passing up the postseason experience and the savvy of a Sergio Romo, but I would probably trust Matt Whistler with almost any outs that I had to get at this point. He for me is right behind Duffy on my list of relievers I trust most, regardless of situation.
I like that, especially with certain matchups. He has done it once. He has gotten that save. I want to throw, and Nick and I talked about this. I want to say earlier this week. I mean, I'm good with Trevor May too. I know his ERA is high and he gives up some home runs, but his stuff is unreal and he can throw hard and he's got 3 good pitches. Like I said, sometimes it doesn't go well, but I think the key point I would make is I don't want to quote unquote waste Tyler Duffy on the 9th inning if the most important situation in the game is in the 7th and 8th. And I know that's not any sort of new ground by any means, but you want your best reliever in the biggest situation. So here's just another good point. Let me hide that. And I'm just going to throw this up there. I don't even think we need to comment too much, but as Mike says, I agree with Donaldson. So he can jump the entire game. And at that point, I'd start wondering if you're ever going to get a pitch called a strike with him back there. So, it is what it is, right? Let's get this question from Heath. Is Sano's 1 or 2 home runs a week worth about 8 to 10 strikeouts a week, especially with Rooker also having first base experience? Before we'll let David go with this one. Obviously, Rooker's out for the year with a broken arm, but I think that question can be answered, say, going forward, too.
Yeah, I think, obviously, first and foremost, it's a bummer that Rooker is out for the year with a broken wrist. But I think that, yes, we know that Miguel Sano is strikeout prone, to say the least. Strikes out a lot. But similar to how we were talking about earlier about Max Kepler compared to bringing up Kirilloff or other minor league players, Miguel Sano has that major league experience. Now, Brent Rooker does too, obviously, but he doesn't have nearly as much as Sano. I say give Sano next year, see how he does. And obviously, Rooker will probably see plate appearances next year, to say the least. Especially, who knows what will go on when it comes to the Rosario situation in the outfield. And if we see that platoon of Rooker and Cave, but I would not be surprised to see Rooker in the outfield again, meaning that he'll get at bats. And I would say 2 years from now, we evaluate that. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to, Sano strikes out a lot, but those plate appearances where he puts the ball in play are very valuable. And, if that's not the same answer a year from now, then absolutely put Rooker in that spot.
He's signed for 2 more years plus an option year after that, and he's averaging about 35 to 40 home runs per 160 games or 150 games, whatever that number is. You play Sano. you just play him and you accept the streakiness, right? Am I wrong there, Matt? Anything you'd add to what David said?
Yeah, just to point out that we're in significant danger of oversimplifying when we veer toward is a certain number of home runs worth this number of strikeouts. The math there actually is closer than you'd think, just in those couple of things. But people overlook the fact that with home runs comes hitting the ball very hard, which leads to more hits on balls in play than you would expect for a guy with Miguel Sano's speed or contact rate. So he's not going to run a very high batting average because he strikes out a lot, but it's also not going to be rock bottom because when he puts the ball in play, it's sort of the opposite of Max Kepler. You can expect a fair number of those to be hits because they're hit so darn hard that it's hard to defend him. Moreover, he's a guy who will take his walks. And as long as he's still able to do that, which of course, like you said, with the streakiness, sometimes he gets into funks where he's not taking those walks. That's when he becomes unproductive. But overall, more often than not, he's going to be hitting it hard, going to be getting enough hits on balls in play and drawing enough walks to more than make up for the big strikeout rate. he's not going to be a superstar now that we know that he's not going to make it as even an average defensive third baseman. He's moved across the diamond, but he's a solid above average player at a reasonable cost. And there's no way you cast that aside, especially for a Brent Rooker who does some of the same things Sano does, but hasn't proven that he can do them all yet at the big league level. And I think his profile suggests that he's never going to do all of the things that Sano does quite as well as Sano does them.
Yeah, and I don't see that as a knock on Rooker. I think Rooker's got a chance to be a very similar player to Sano, with the ability to play some in the outfield. I do like his right-handedness, his ability to play left and right and first and DH and pinch hit, and there's a lot of value in that player. I want to cover just a couple of topics before we call it a night, but real quick, again, I want to throw out another catching option. Tom Hadelstead, I would say Romo would be a fun catcher when an umpire misses a pitch. Not going to disagree. Any other ideas from people watching? Feel free to add those. Who do you think would be the best emergency catcher for the Twins? I want to talk about a couple of things, and we're going to go to David here. Base running is, I know, the whole Toot Bland thing and that kind of thing. The Twins had a few of them tonight. Eddie Rosario slipping on first base could be considered one. I would also talk more about in their big inning. Mitch Garver got thrown out at second, trying to advance on a deep fly ball to center, in which another runner advanced to third. And the other one was Byron Buxton with 2 outs, getting a great 2 straight, beat the shift single to add another insurance run with a runner on third, but he got thrown out fairly easily. I mean, for Buxton at second base. So in general, David, what do you feel about those base running mistakes? Were they big mistakes tonight? Oh, you're on mute. Go ahead. Oh.
All right, I am unmuted now. There we go. Well, first of all, I think Buxton has been excellent in 1-2 counts these last couple of games. But at the end of the day, in this situation, for both Buxton and for Garver, not huge mistakes. I mean, the Twins baseball is a game of scenarios and situations. It's a situational game, and I have no problem with aggressive base running in those situations. Now, if we talk about Buxton a couple of days ago, where Tony Diaz, sends him home when he gets tagged out, that's a different ball game. But tonight, the Twins are up by, they have a hefty lead. Buxton tries to go to second. I have no problem with that. He is the fastest base runner in the American League, in the majors. And I have no problem with that. I think also when it comes to Garver too, in that situation, trying to tag up to second, that throw to second base was pinpoint. Morneau talked about if that would have been 2 feet in any other direction, Garver would have been in safe with runners at second and third with 1 out. So I wouldn't read too much into it. I'm always a fan of aggressive base running. And the result of that is sometimes you're going to get tagged out, and it, high risk, high reward.
Matt, do you agree, disagree? I think David's biggest point is it is somewhat situational.
It is. And honestly, base running, really good base running, can turn a playoff series upside down. Really good base running turns even good defenses into mush, at least some of the time. And it's not a requirement to go far in October, but it always helps, and it often helps in sort of unexpected ways. There's a difference between being a slow team and being a bad base running team. Unfortunately, for most of the last 2 years, the Twins have been both. They lack speed, and the speed they have, they don't use well, other than Buxton. And they just don't use it enough. There will be an over-aggressive send now and then, but by and large, they are not a very aggressive, sort of daring team on the bases. I'd like to see them be more that way, especially in October when that can break a game. And so I thought tonight was perfectly fine because I want to see them in that mode. I want to see them sort of practicing that in a way. This is a chance to try out some of those things, because once you get to that best of 3 series, wherever it's played against whoever they're playing, those are the 90 feet you're going to have to grab now and then. It's going to have to sometimes be people like Mitch Garver advancing 90 feet that the other team doesn't expect. Maybe not exactly Garver, and hopefully, this taught him something about his limitations or about how to get going, those sorts of things. But I want to see those tries a little bit more often. I want to see this team become better at base running, even though their personnel still is not fast or going to be fast. And if they can start grabbing some of those, it's worth the occasional out you make.
Yeah, and I'd add, Mitch Garver, like David said, that took a perfect throw to get him out at second from the wall in center field. I love that. In retrospect, you kind of look back and say, okay, Buxton was up next. Odds of him hitting into a double play, not real high, but I do like that aggressiveness. Try to get a second runner in scoring position. In that case, if he's safe, which it was a close play, and Buxton does exactly the same, which you, of course, can't necessarily know based on the butterfly effect, but if that happens, it might be 2 runs. And again, Garver's a great athlete. I think he's a really good athlete, an underrated athlete, especially for a catcher. So I don't have a problem with that. And again, I didn't so much have a problem with the Buxton one either. My only concern there is the injuries, and you've already got a lead. But I like you said, I don't want to take away his aggressiveness or anyone's. So that's part of the Eddie Rosario, why every time he gets thrown out trying to take an extra base, I usually will post, have I mentioned how much I love watching Eddie Rosario play baseball? Because I love that aggressiveness, and I hope they don't take that away. So trying to wear it down here, but I want to ask you, Matt, Mitch Garver did return yesterday. He played Friday night. He came in and had a line drive hit on Saturday to drive in a couple of runs here tonight. Are we hoping that he's just 100% healthy and almost that half a month, it was a full month off, was enough to just reset him?
I think you can pretty well trust that he's at full health. Something like an intercostal, it can be very fragile and take a long, long time. In this case, in other cases, it can turn out to be fairly mild and you bounce back quickly. And that seems to be what happened. I don't think the Twins would be stretching him as, trying to get him back in the lineup if he wasn't fully healthy, just because Ryan Jeffers has been good enough and they've gotten Avila back. So you can pretty well trust the Twins on this. I think he's at full health. It's really hard, really, really hard, impossible, I think you could argue, to evaluate him well in the span of what's just a few games before the playoffs get started. But I would be surprised at this point if he's not on the roster. You can probably afford to carry 3 catchers just because, I don't know, you're going to find somewhere else on the roster where the utility isn't quite enough to carry someone like one of Jake Cave and Lamont Wade can probably be nudged off the roster if you need to add a Luis Arias or get Randy Dobnak back on, things like that. So I'd expect to see all 3 of them. And I don't think we can expect Garver to necessarily be himself again at the plate, but it was a really good sign tonight that he hit that pitch as squarely as he did I think it was a 3-2 count. That was a trademark Mitch Garver at bat. Worked a deep count and then made the solid contact. Didn't have the issues with swinging right through his pitch that he was having early in the year. At this point, he's done enough, or I think you can hope that he'll do enough over the next week to be in that playoff picture. But probably Ryan Jeffers is still at the top of the catching depth chart for now.
Yeah, what do you think, David? I'm very curious how the catching situation, as Matthew says, they can make other moves in terms of, they're still going to have a 28-man roster. You could get rid of a short-term or short-inning reliever and keep a Dobnik and maybe get rid of a second short, especially you've got a 2-game series potentially or a 3-game series. And then I don't know if it's 5-game or all 7s after that. But, how do you see the catcher situation playing out over the next week and then in the playoffs?
Yeah, well, I think, it's a situation in the sense that Ryan Jeffers has come up to the major leagues and he's proven himself. he hasn't necessarily gone through the traditional growing pains that we see, prospects coming up go through, especially a catcher, where I'm a firm believer that defensively catching is one of it is the hardest position. And I think that he's done it very well. He's great behind the plate. And he can hit the ball hard too. Now at the same time, I think Garver, it comes down to, how much do we trust the success that he had last year? Like Matthew said, I think the 3-2 count that he had tonight where he knocked that ball to left field, it wasn't just a base hit. He hit the snot out of that ball. He hit it very hard. And that was really good to see, in my opinion. I would love to see him get a few more quality starts offensively through the remainder of the regular season here. And let's say that goes well. Absolutely start him as their starting catcher. But if it doesn't go well, I think that Jeffers is able to hold the fort down. And let's not forget about Alex Avila too, who is he strong behind the plate. He had a double tonight too, which was great to see. So he can hit the ball too. But I would say, Garver, Jeffers, Avila in that order. But no true standout in those three.
Yeah, I think all three of them make the roster, especially with two of them still just coming off an injury. And even if Jeffers is your starter or Garver is your starter, it's nice having the other one as a pinch hitting option. Run Jake Cave in that type of a situation, and have the other one available. So I think there's a lot of value to having both of them. It's not like the old 24 or 25 man rosters and trying to get three catchers in there. I want to give you each one a last thought before we call it a show, but real quickly, I want Matt to kind of go over tomorrow night. The Twins are the game of the week, Sunday night game, and it's Yu Darvish against Jose Barrios, and what I think is a pretty exciting pitching matchup. What are your thoughts going into tomorrow's game in Chicago? These teams are both really matched, and I think both pretty good.
Yeah, that pitching matchup's going to be a joy, and it could, of course, blow up. We sometimes build up these as potential pitching duels, and then both guys just have an off night. But on paper, it looks fantastic. Barrios has been so much better of late, and this version of Yu Darvish can give any offense fits. I think the things that he is doing, the way he has gone sort of very, very slider heavy. He's almost made that his primary pitch and forced hitters to sit on that. And then he can throw you 97, 4-seam or 2-seam almost as the surprise. He's doing that. He's working with 6, 7, 8 pitches the way that he does when he's at his very best. And the command has been improved this year, so that he's not even having some of the home run problems that we saw him have last season, which was in itself a very good year for him. It's going to be a great test for the Twins offense. It's also going to be a great test for Darvish, because I don't know that the Cubs, other than their 3-game series against the White Sox, and I don't recall whether Darvish even pitched during that one, I don't know that they've seen an offense of the Twins caliber to this point. And obviously we saw what Kyle Hendricks was able to do with that Twins offense, but then we saw what happened tonight when the Cubs bullpen was asked to take on a slightly heavier load. And it's a thin and injury depleted bullpen at this point. So they are heavily reliant on their starting pitchers. Darvish is key to their playoff hopes. And so it'll be an interesting test for him against this Twins lineup, but it's also a chance for the Twins to sort of get tuned up and say, this is the kind of pitcher we're going to be facing, whether we are facing the Yankees and it's Garrett Cole and Masahiro Tanaka, or whether it, by some miracle at this point turns out to be someone like Cleveland or even the Blue Jays, and you're getting Shane Bieber or Hyun-Jin Ryu in the first game. That's the caliber of pitcher who's taking the mound for the opponent tomorrow night. And the Twins get another look at that, another chance to say who's putting together good, competent at-bats against a pitcher who can both pound and expand the zone and beat you with spin or with speed.
And for me, the thing I'll be watching is how Barrios handles the situation. It's a night game on Sunday night. It's the game of the week, essentially. And there have been times where he gets a little bit too amped up in big games and in big moments. And it'd be nice to see him just kind of stay cool and calm. We know how amped he is to face Francisco Lindor at times, and that has been either really good or really bad, in both cases have happened. So tomorrow I expect Javi Baez, Barrios' brother-in-law, who worked out with him throughout the quarantine, to strike out twice and to hit a home run or something like that, because that's going to be a fun matchup. Real quickly, David, I'd like to get your final thought as we head to the final week of the season.
Yeah, well, I think like Matthew said, Yu Darvish has been rock solid this year. He's 7-2, excellent ERA. But the Twins have been good against good pitchers. They've been good against pitchers like Giolito. We saw them crack Shane Bieber for the first time this last week, which was awesome to see. And I think the Cubs are a team that are very similar to the Twins in a lot of ways so far in the 60-game season. Both teams have proved that they can pitch well. The Twins, I think, overall have pitched well this year. Yes, there have been blunders, but at the same time, there have been a lot of quality starts from both teams. But the Twins have struggled on offense, and the Cubs at times have as well. When we look at the Cubs, though, prior to this series against the Twins, the Cubs were just, they were 5-2 against teams over 500. They've only played 7 games against teams over 500. And a lot of that can be due to the fact that the NL Central isn't necessarily strong. You've got the Reds and the Cardinals, who are both knotted at 500 right now. And there's a solid chance that both those teams will actually make the playoffs. But this is going to be an excellent chance, obviously on primetime TV. Jose Barrios to show his stuff and to get a W. And yes, the Twins' chances of winning the AL Central are slight. But at the end of the day, if they can finish the season on a hot stretch, that's going to be huge for their confidence going into the postseason and potentially getting that home field advantage in that first series.
The Twins and Rocco Baldelli, I think, have focused this season on having everybody healthy and ready to go for the playoffs, not necessarily for any point in the season. So getting Garver back, getting Kepler going here, getting Polanco going, making sure Cruz is okay. All these things are pretty important. So, Matt, any final thoughts about either tomorrow, this series, or what you're looking for the rest of the season here?
Well, I'll note, and I think we have touched on it at a couple of different points, a couple of the different aspects of it, but I was encouraged and pleased to see the way that Baldelli used the bench tonight. That's going to be important in October. You've got to be willing, and obviously in October, Josh Donaldson shouldn't be sitting on the bench. But Jake Cave as a pinch runner paid off, and even if it hadn't paid off, that was the right move in that situation. Getting Garver in for that key at bat where he had delivered the 2-run single that really broke the game open. Up to that point, they were in good shape, but it certainly hadn't totally turned. And so I like to see Baldelli doing that. He's going to have to continue to be aggressive because this is a Twins offense at this point where you have to play some matchups. You have to be a little nimble and a little more proactive because you just can't trust everyone who goes up there to put together the tough at bats every time the way maybe you could during better times for this offense, especially last year. And obviously, the one thing we didn't really touch on at all tonight, but Nelson Cruz was scratched with knee soreness before this game. Over the final week, it's going to be a huge story whether they do successfully get everyone healthy. And if Nelson Cruz or Donaldson or Buxton are not at full strength when they reach the playoffs, we're going to be reminded that they were so much counting on people getting healthy that they didn't go out and add a bat at the trade deadline when they had that opportunity.
Yeah, and add Luis Ariz to that. They put him on the injured list, I believe, in such a timeline that he could get back and hopefully get a few at-bats as well before
I think he was eligible to come off today, but didn't do it. So we'll have to see how that unfolds over the rest of this regular season.
Yeah, and if you look back at, previous managers with the Twins, I think a lot of that strategy ended up being, okay, it's eligible today. He probably could do that. We have a game tomorrow and then an off day the next day. Let's give him 2 more days and get him in there for 2 days, and then there's another off day, and then a 3-game series, and then the playoffs. So, I mean, that may or may not be the strategy, but I think that's one way to look at it. And you're right. I mean, they have been playing for the postseason. With that, my final thought goes back to the manager, and it's not Rocco Baldelli, but Ron Gardenhire. You saw the news today kind of break that Ron Gardenhire had through Al Avila, the manager or the general manager of the Tigers, that due to some health problems and things like that, Gardenhire was retiring as of today, which of course immediately throws all kinds of red flags up there. So my first initial response or thought is, be well. I mean, like you said earlier, we talked about it. He's already overcome cancer and the surgery with that once. I know he was ill when he was visiting Minneapolis when the Twins were playing the Tigers a couple weeks ago. We just, number one, want him healthy and hope that this is good for him. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe his contract was up and he did a good job of developing what's going to be a pretty good roster over the next couple of years, and it's just time to move on. Be interested to see what comes up here in the next few weeks. But again, he did so much for the Twins going back to 1986 as a player in the minor leagues and trying to make that team in 1987, him and Ron Washington losing out to Al Newman, who got 2 World Series rings. You think about that, 1986, and he was the Twins manager through, I believe, 2014. I mean, that's a 26, almost a 30-year run with the Twins organization that is now a 60-season organization. So again, he's been a part of this organization for nearly half of its existence. So I just feel like as Twins fans, I hope we appreciate what Gardenhire did for the organization over a long period of time. He was part of that 91 championship coaching staff, and he's been part of some really good teams, part of rebuilding, and part of what we consider the Twins way. And at least the good aspects of that, I hope. So with that, I want to thank both David Youngs and Matt Trueblood for being on extra long tonight. It's Saturday night. What else were we going to do, right? Hopefully we're talking about a Twins win, which we haven't been able to do a lot either. They beat the Cubs, I believe, 8-1 tonight behind Michael Pineda, another strong bullpen performance and a big inning, a few home runs. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all that asked questions, took the time to ask those questions and hear our responses, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can find this there at all of those locations. You can also find it by searching Twins Daily Podcast on Google or wherever you search, and wherever you listen to podcasts, you can listen to those. With that, we will be back tomorrow night. I believe Nick Nelson is hosting. I'm not sure. I think, Matt, you're on again tomorrow night, but I don't remember. David, maybe you are too.
I just might make an appearance. Yes, I'm writing the recap as well, but I think I might be joining as well for the postgame.
All right. Well, we appreciate all of you and all of you for listening. Keep the comments coming in. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And the Twins are going back to the playoffs, second straight year. I know it's a little bit less meaningful this year maybe, but ultimately the idea is to get in and see what happens. So we'll be following the next week. Check out twinsdaily.com. Go Twins!
Win